Hello everyone, once again your host Harry is here. So, what you're about to hear will shake the foundation of the biggest sporting event on the planet. Millions of fans have been counting down the days, stadiums have been built, billions of dollars have been spent, and now, just weeks before the greatest show on earth kicks off on American soil, FIFA is sitting on a powder keg that could explode at any moment. We're talking about a crisis so deep, so tangled, and so politically charged that even the most powerful sports organization in the world might not be able to contain it. And if you think this doesn't affect you, think again. Because whether you're a die-hard soccer fan, a casual viewer, or someone who simply cares about fairness and justice in sports, what's happening right now is something you absolutely need to know about. Stay with me, because this story gets wilder with every layer you peel back. And before we go any further, if you're new here, smash that subscribe button right now and hit the like button because we are breaking this down in a way nobody else is covering it, and you do not want to miss a single second of what's coming. Let's start with the basics. The FIFA World Cup 2026 is set to be the largest World Cup in history. For the first time ever, 48 teams will compete instead of the traditional 32. The tournament is being hosted across 3 countries, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, with the majority of matches taking place on American soil. Cities like New York, Los Angeles, Dallas, Miami, and Seattle are all part of the hosting plan. The infrastructure investment has been massive, the marketing machine has been running at full speed, and the global audience is expected to break every record in sports broadcasting history. This was supposed to be FIFA's crowning moment, a celebration of football on the grandest stage imaginable. But behind the glossy promotional videos and the carefully crafted press releases, there is a storm brewing that has been building for months, and it is now impossible to ignore. The crisis has multiple fronts, and that's what makes it so dangerous. It's not just one problem FIFA can quietly sweep under the rug. It's a combination of political tensions, financial disputes, human rights concerns, legal battles, and internal governance failures all colliding at the same time, right before the eyes of the entire world. Let's break it down one piece at a time because each layer matters, and together they paint a picture of an organization in serious trouble. First, let's talk about the political dimension, because this is where things get uncomfortable fast. The United States is currently navigating one of the most complex geopolitical environments in decades. Trade disputes, immigration tensions, and diplomatic friction with multiple countries have created a climate where organizing a multinational sporting event is far more complicated than it should be. FIFA requires that all participating nations and their players, staff, and supporters be allowed to travel freely to and within the host country. But recent policy decisions and political rhetoric have raised serious questions about whether that guarantee can actually be honored. There have been reports of visa complications, travel restrictions, and border concerns that could potentially prevent certain national teams or their fans from entering the country without facing serious obstacles. FIFA has publicly stated that it has received assurances from the U.S. government that all accredited World Cup participants will have safe and unrestricted access. But words on paper and reality on the ground are two very different things, and several football federations have already privately expressed concern to FIFA about what happens if those assurances fall through. This isn't a hypothetical worry. This is a live, active concern being discussed in meeting rooms at the highest levels of international football governance. Then there's the issue of financial transparency and corruption, a topic that has haunted FIFA for decades and refuses to go away. The organization has been trying to rebuild its image ever since the catastrophic scandal of 2015, when dozens of officials were indicted by American prosecutors for bribery, fraud, and money laundering on a scale that shocked even the most cynical observers. FIFA promised reform, they brought in new leadership, they implemented new governance structures, and for a while it seemed like the message was getting through. But recent reporting from investigative journalists in Europe and Latin America suggests that the old habits have not been fully eradicated. There are ongoing questions about the bidding process for 2026, about the distribution of commercial revenues, and about the oversight of construction and infrastructure contracts in host cities. None of this has yet risen to the level of a formal legal indictment, but the smoke is thick enough that multiple FIFA member associations have started asking uncomfortable questions, and not all of them are getting satisfying answers. Now let's shift to something that has become a major flashpoint in recent months, the human rights dimension of this World Cup. You might remember the intense global backlash that surrounded the Qatar World Cup in 2022, when the treatment of migrant workers, the restrictions on LGBTQ individuals, and the broader authoritarian context of the host nation drew widespread condemnation. FIFA took a beating in the press, from civil society groups, from players, and from governments around the world. There were calls for boycotts, there were protests outside stadiums, players wore armbands and made statements, and FIFA, to put it charitably, did not handle the criticism well. Fast forward to 2026, and many people assumed that hosting the tournament in North America would sidestep the human rights controversy entirely. After all, the United States, Canada, and Mexico are democratic nations with established civil liberties frameworks. What could go wrong? The answer, it turns out, is quite a lot. In the United States, there has been a significant rollback of protections and rights for LGBTQ individuals in several states that are hosting World Cup matches. Organizations representing LGBTQ football fans have issued formal warnings that attending matches in certain American cities could expose supporters to discrimination, harassment, or worse. FIFA has found itself caught between its stated commitment to inclusion and non-discrimination and its political reality of not wanting to antagonize the host government. The tension is real, it is documented, and it has not been resolved. Human rights organizations have submitted formal letters to FIFA demanding clarity on what protections will be in place for fans from all backgrounds. FIFA's responses have been vague, bureaucratic, and widely criticized as insufficient. On top of all this, there is growing unrest within the world of professional football itself. Player welfare and workload have become crisis-level issues. The expansion of the World Cup to 48 teams means more games. The introduction of the expanded Club World Cup, which FIFA launched with enormous fanfare and equally enormous controversy, has added dozens of additional high-stakes matches to an already overloaded calendar. The world's best players are being asked to play more games than ever before, with shorter recovery windows in tournaments that pile on top of each other with no real breathing room. The world's top players' unions and associations have been vocal about this. There have been threats of legal action. There have been formal complaints filed with sports governing bodies in Europe. Several of the world's biggest clubs have publicly stated that they believe FIFA is putting commercial revenue ahead of player health and safety. And the timing of all this is brutal for FIFA because it's happening in the months directly leading up to the tournament they need to go perfectly. The stakes here go beyond just a single tournament. FIFA's entire financial model for the next cycle depends on the success of World Cup 2026. Broadcasting rights deals, sponsorship contracts, licensing agreements, all of it is tied to the expected performance and reach of this tournament. If something goes wrong, if a major controversy erupts during the tournament, if key teams or players pull out, if fan attendance is lower than expected because of geopolitical tensions or safety concerns, the financial consequences for FIFA would be enormous, and those consequences would ripple outward, affecting national football federations around the world, affecting youth development programs, affecting the grassroots game in dozens of countries. This is not a small-stakes situation. The decisions FIFA makes in the next few weeks could shape the future of world football for the next decade. Now let's pivot to the second major story that is intersecting with all of this in a way that might surprise you. Because while FIFA is dealing with its crisis in the sports world, there is another massive controversy unfolding in Mexico that is directly connected to the World Cup story through the lens of social justice, institutional trust, and the question of who gets protected and who gets left behind. We're talking about the IMS pension crisis, specifically the devastating ruling that has just come down from Mexico's Supreme Court, the SCJN, affecting retired workers under the old Law 73 pension system. Here's the background you need to understand this story fully. In Mexico, workers who were part of the Social Security system under what's known as Law 73, the framework that governed pensions before the major reform of 1997, were promised a set of benefits as part of their retirement package. These workers, many of them now elderly, spent decades contributing to the system, working hard, following the rules, and counting on the security they were promised. Among those benefits was the aguinaldo, the Christmas bonus, which for pensioners under Law 73 was calculated based on a formula that had historically provided a meaningful supplement to their monthly pension income. This wasn't a luxury. For many of these retirees, the aguinaldo represented a significant portion of their annual income used to cover medical expenses, housing costs, and basic living needs. But now, the Supreme Court of Mexico has issued a ruling that effectively cuts the aguinaldo calculation for these pensioners, directly reducing the amount they will receive. The word that is spreading through retiree communities, through social media groups, through community organizations across Mexico, is that this is a brutal blow, un golpe brutal, to people who have no ability to go back to work, who have no other safety net, and who trusted the system to honor its commitments. The reaction has been one of shock, anger, and deep betrayal. Pensioners and their families are asking how this can be legal, how a court can reduce a benefit that was guaranteed under the law that governed their working lives, and what kind of precedent this sets for every other worker in Mexico who is counting on their pension to sustain them in old age. The specific details of the ruling matter here. The SCJN's decision focuses on the methodology used to calculate the aguinaldo for Law 73 pensioners. Under the previous interpretation, the bonus was calculated using a formula that took into account the full salary history and certain multipliers that increased the final payout. The new ruling effectively changes how that calculation works, resulting in a lower number for a significant portion of affected retirees. The IMSS, Mexico's Social Security Institute, had been arguing for this change as part of broader efforts to manage its financial obligations, which have grown substantially as Mexico's population ages and the number of pensioners increases. But critics say that the financial pressures of the institution should not be resolved on the backs of elderly retirees who earned those benefits through decades of work. The communities most affected by this ruling are precisely the kinds of working-class and lower-middle-class Mexicans who have the least capacity to absorb a reduction in income. We're talking about former factory workers, teachers, healthcare workers, agricultural laborers, and countless others who entered the formal economy under the promise of Social Security protection. Many of them chose jobs in the formal sector specifically because of the pension benefits, accepting lower salaries in exchange for the security of knowing they would be taken care of in retirement. To now have a court ruling reduce what they were promised feels, to many of them, like a fundamental breach of the social contract. And here is where the two stories, the FIFA World Cup crisis and the Mexican pension ruling, converge in a way that is worth thinking about carefully. Both situations, at their core, are about institutional trust. They're about whether powerful institutions, whether it's FIFA governing global football or the Mexican Supreme Court and the IMSS governing Social Security, can be counted on to keep their commitments to ordinary people. In both cases, we're seeing institutions under financial and political pressure making decisions that prioritize their own stability or the stability of powerful interests over the well-being of the people they are supposed to serve. In both cases, ordinary people are paying the price. For the World Cup, it's fans who might not be able to safely attend matches, or players who are being pushed to the physical limit for commercial gain, or workers in host cities who are being displaced without adequate compensation. For the pension crisis, it's elderly retirees in Mexico who are watching a promised benefit get taken away through a legal ruling that they have no power to reverse. In both cases, the people at the top of these institutions are insulated from the consequences of their decisions, while the people at the bottom bear the full weight. This is why these stories matter beyond just sports or just social policy. They're part of a larger pattern that people around the world are recognizing more and more clearly. The institutions that were built to serve the public interest, whether they're sports governing bodies or social security systems or courts or governments, are increasingly being seen as failing to live up to that purpose. And when people see that pattern repeated across different domains in different countries, the erosion of trust becomes cumulative and profound. Now let's bring this back to the immediate moment and talk about what happens next, because things are moving fast, and the next few weeks are going to be critical on multiple fronts. For FIFA, the pressure is on to provide clear, concrete answers to the questions that have been raised. The political questions about travel and access need to be resolved with binding guarantees, not vague assurances. The human rights questions about fan safety and inclusion need to be addressed with specific, enforceable protections, not corporate language about values. The financial transparency questions need to be met with actual documentation and accountability, not press releases. And the player welfare crisis needs to be addressed before more top players or clubs decide that enough is enough and take action that could genuinely destabilize the tournament. FIFA has a very short window to show the world that it can be trusted to run this event responsibly, and right now that window is closing fast. For Mexico's pensioners, the situation is also urgent. Legal challenges to the SCJN ruling are expected, and advocacy groups are already mobilizing to push back against the reduction in aguinaldo payments. Labor unions and retiree organizations are calling for legislative action to override or mitigate the effects of the ruling, and the political pressure on the Mexican government is building, because this is an issue that affects millions of voters directly and has the potential to become a major electoral flashpoint if not addressed. The question of whether there is any path to restoring the full benefit, or at least cushioning the blow for the most vulnerable pensioners, remains open, and the coming weeks will determine whether the political will exists to find that path. What both of these situations remind us is that the biggest stories are rarely just about one thing. The FIFA crisis isn't just about football, it's about geopolitics, human rights, financial accountability, and the limits of institutional power. The pension crisis isn't just about retirement benefits. It's about the promises a society makes to its workers, the reliability of its institutions, and the fundamental question of who bears the cost when those institutions face financial strain. When you understand these stories at that level, they stop being abstract news events and start feeling very personal, very urgent, and very relevant to the world we all live in. This is the kind of story that deserves your attention, your engagement, and your voice. We need people talking about this, asking the hard questions, demanding accountability from the institutions that claim to serve us. That's why I'm asking you right now to drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Do you believe FIFA can actually pull this World Cup off without a major scandal? Do you think Mexico's pensioners will get justice? Are you frustrated with the way powerful institutions treat ordinary people? Say it. Your voice matters, and every comment helps this community grow and keeps these conversations alive. And if you found this breakdown valuable, please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Not everyone is tracking both of these stories, and the connections between them are exactly the kind of thing that gets lost when news is broken into isolated fragments. Share it, discuss it, and let's keep pushing for the accountability and transparency that both situations demand. Because here's the truth. The World Cup is supposed to be a celebration. It's supposed to be 29 days of football, joy, national pride, and shared humanity. And the pensioners of Mexico are supposed to be enjoying the security they spent their careers earning. The fact that both of those things are under threat at the same moment is not a coincidence. It's a symptom of a deeper problem in how our institutions operate and who they truly serve. And the only way anything changes is if people like you stay informed, stay engaged, and refuse to look away. The countdown to the World Cup is running. The pension fight in Mexico is heating up. The next few weeks are going to tell us a lot about what kind of world we're actually living in. Stay tuned because we'll be here covering every development as it breaks.